Hello, welcome to the Green Bay Football Show. My name is John Dodds. Tom Pippins is on assignment. On this show, our focus is on our favorite professional team, the Green Bay Packers, how they acquire talent, and what's going on at minicamp. Our guest today will be Mike Clemens from the Bill Michaels Radio Network. Our program would not exist but for the sponsorship of Business Fitness. Joining me here today in studio is Dave Heineck from Business Fitness. Dave, thanks for sponsoring our show. Tell us about Business Fitness.
Well, you're welcome, John. It's thrilling to be working with you on the show. Business Fitness has, we've been around for the last 19 years. We work with a software product called NetSuite, which is a cloud-based, browser-based system that is used to run businesses of any size. And it is, here in the United States last year, 2/3 of the companies that went public were running NetSuite on their IPO. So it's a very popular platform. Oracle had purchased them in 2016, and we bring 19 years of experience to our clients, and we're just having a lot of fun with it.
And you work with businesses of all sizes?
All sizes. About 2/3 of our clients are within a 3-hour drive of Milwaukee, but we have clients in Manhattan, in Oregon, and we have about a half a dozen in Texas.
Terrific. Well, thank you for sponsoring it, and it was your idea that was really the push that got this show going, so we appreciate that.
Well, John, you're just a wealth of Packer knowledge, and it needs to be shared. So you're the man.
Thank you for that, I think. And we'll get right into the show with Mike Clemens, who is from the Bill Michaels Radio Network. Joining me today as guest is Mike Clemens from the Bill Michaels Radio Network. Mike is the hardest working person in radio and attends all Green Bay Packer practices, and he's there at minicamp. I've known Mike for over 25 years and trust his insights implicitly. Mike, what's going on up in Green Bay?
Well, they wrapped up a week of mandatory minicamp. Most importantly is Aaron Rodgers, who I think is probably as complex a guy as there is. I think he's right where the Packers organization would like him in terms of, first of all, on the field, throwing around the football, just phenomenal. You know, it used to take, John, you know this from out here, maybe it'd take Favre a couple of weeks during training camp to find it when he was in his 30s. And Rodgers looks like he'd been here for 3 weeks. I mean, the spin, the rotation on the ball, the different variety of throws, he looked great that way. And then he talked to the media for about 20 minutes afterwards. And, you know, he was detailed about Davante Adams' decision to go to the Raiders, that he had a sense that that was going to be the way it is. At some point, Aaron Rodgers said, you know, it's not really my job to sell him to stay in Green Bay and with the Packers. And he feels confident with the talent that they've brought in, including Sammy Watkins, that he can work with this group. He's got 3 years experience with Matt LaFleur, and he seemed to be in a positive, upbeat attitude to be back in and committed to this season.
Now, what was really interesting to me was the comment made by David Carr, who's now the former quarterback, who's now at NFL.com. He was saying that this Davante Adams trade was the culmination of 4 years of negotiations. And that opened up a whole can of worms. But what that led me to believe was, you know, Davante Adams is probably thinking, who's going to be the quarterback here if I signed a long-term deal with Green Bay? And he always wanted to return home, be close to his mom, have his mom close to family, and have that relationship. And I think he's from California, so he wanted to, Las Vegas was closer. But what was your take on those comments?
I think it's all legit. I remember Derek Carr, watching him in a preseason game against the Packers here, and some Raiders preseason. You know, during training camp, we're living and breathing it here for about 5 or 6 weeks, and I've got some of these preseason games on a monitor here in the newsroom at Lambeau Field. And I said, who's number 4 for the Raiders? I guess he's going to beat Matt Schwab. This guy has got it. It was about the same time that also the Cowboys had a guy named Dak Prescott, who would end up taking over for Tony Romo. And so then I find out that, wait a minute, that Derek Carr was Devontae Adams' quarterback at Fresno State. And back then, Devontae would talk fondly about the connection that they had, the friendship they had. And that's the last piece to the puzzle into this situation in the last year, is the fact that Devontae, for whatever, was going on in Green Bay and the greatness he had with Aaron Rodgers, at some point he's got a close friendship with Derek Carr, to the point where now that he's with the Raiders, those guys are riding in the car together. I mean, you can't beat that. So he had a great working relationship as a teammate with Aaron Rodgers, but Derek Carr's his friend. And I got a feeling that at some point last year, Devontae Adams gave it one more shot. He checked off the box that he tried to be, the best statistic wide receiver in the NFL and got paid accordingly. But he got everything he wanted. He's back home, closer to home in Vegas with family, with his best friend at quarterback. He gave it a shot to try and get a Super Bowl ring in Green Bay. I don't know, Josh McDaniels is going to get them any closer to a Super Bowl anytime soon while he's out there. But at least Devontae got paid. Whether it gets into the Hall of Fame or ever gets into a Super Bowl remains to be seen.
Great. As far as wide receivers go, what do the veterans look like so far in camp, and how about the rookies?
Well, this Alan Lazard thing has been bizarre, Dave, because he's a restricted free agent, and you tender a guy, and he just signs the paperwork, and he comes in for a year. And then we find out, day one, I asked LaFleur, hey, is Lazard in the building? He says, no, I haven't seen Alan yet. So now that means we're in some sort of a different situation. Alan Lazard feels that with Devontae gone and maybe some money left on the table, his agent feels that they have leverage to get Alan Lazard a 2 or 3 year deal, not just sign a 1 year tender. I've heard some guys that are good at analyzing this stuff that, Lazard ought to just come in, have a great year with Devontae out of the way, and then he could name his price next year. Apparently, Lazard would probably feel more secure if he could just get that out of Green Bay right now, knowing what the situation is. The next thing is Sammy Watkins. Now, we hadn't seen him in any of the OTAs. However, once we got into this minicamp situation the other day, it was confirmed that Watkins actually has been here through most of the OTAs, just not available to the ones where they let the media in. So Watkins is out on the practice field on day one of the minicamp and looking pretty good, looking like he's familiar with what's going on. The timing that he had with Rodgers, he's 6'1", and he told us that Sammy Watkins was very impressive in how upfront he was, because we have all seen his highlights with the Bills and the other teams he's played with over the years, but we've also always heard that Sammy Watkins is up in the last month with a foot injury. And he said, that's why I've had all these short stints in my career with the Bills, with the Rams, 1 year when his offensive coordinator was Matt LaFleur out in L.A., with the stint with the Ravens, and now here with Green Bay. He said it's due to injuries. So I'm into my 8th NFL year in my career. I've got to try and turn that around, and I hope I can do it at this point. He said it was a long waiting for that phone call until April 14th when the Packers called and said, hey, come on in and talk to Matt LaFleur and your receivers coach, Jason Vrabel, a guy you worked with when you got drafted by the Bills. And he was very upfront and said, you know what, I weigh 220. I'll get this down to about 215. I should be at 210, and I'll be at the speed I think I can still play at when training camp starts. So very positive attitude from Sammy Watkins as well. And then after that, all these great rookie talent that we could talk about.
We're talking with Mike Clemens from the Bill Michaels Show. He's up at Lambeau Field. And Alan Lazard is an interesting person. Last year, he's a real good team guy. Last year, he even volunteered to go back on special teams when the coverage units were having such a bad time. And he's one of those rare guys. I remember 2 years ago in the snow in the Meadowlands, he had, I think, 4 unassisted tackles on the road game when the Packers played the Giants, and he was special teams player of the week. The same week, I think he caught 3 touchdown passes from Aaron Rodgers, and he was offensive player of the week. It's kind of a really unique set of skills he has. And there was a Packer official that I caught a couple of years ago, and I said, he was in the food line, so he was not ready for the question, I think. And I asked him, I won't mention his name, but Alan Lazard, he's such a good special teams player. Could you put 20 pounds on him and make him a tight end? Because he seems to be in the slot an awful lot. And he kind of looked at me and he said, that comes up weekly in our meetings, but his agent and he don't want to be pigeonholed in a tight end because wide receivers make more money, and he does more wide receivers things. And I thought, yeah, he's just an overall good player to have on your team.
Yeah, and
that's
his
a great
blocking
story,
downfield is great too.
Yeah,
It's amazing when he's not catching the ball.
Dave LaFleur has called Alan Lazard his thug downfield. I mean, he comes up. If you see Aaron Jones pick up 35 yards, it's usually because 10 yards downfield to that side of the field, you see Alan Lazard taking out the corner or taking out the safety. So, yeah, Lazard did post a message on Instagram the other day. He's tried to get out one message like, I'm going to be a Packer. But, either the agent's doing a good job of keeping it quiet right now as we have this chat. Certainly you're not going to get any leaks out of the team about what exactly is on the table, whether or not Russ Ball is willing to budge, and Brian Gutekunst on bringing in Lazard. But, in the meantime, this gives all kinds of extra reps to these young guys, like, your second-round pick in Christian Watson, who, John, when you talk about, I was thinking, I don't want to compare him to Tyler Davis because he's a little bit bigger than that, but I guess he's pretty close in terms of body type to what Jordy was.
Yeah,
and the speed is there. The hands are out there. He's had some drops, but, you're not going to judge drops until you put some pads on and you're into training camp. But Watson looks great. Romeo Dubs makes some nice plays. And then on the last day of this mandatory minicamp, that Samari Torrey kid, the one who took the chance and left Montana, got into the Nebraska program to be on a little bit of a higher profile, got a 7th-round pick from Green Bay, wears number 83. He's a short, quick guy over the middle, and he's catching passes from Jordan Love and from Aaron Rodgers on an 11-11 inside the Hudson Center and looking like, he could compete along with Amari Cooper, Randall Cobb, and the rest of those guys. So the funny thing, guys, about the Packers offense in general is this. We should be in a panic. I mean, Josh Myers is the starting center, and with Bakhtiari still out, with Elton Jenkins over there working on the exercise machine coming back from an ACL. John Runyon played a lot of left guard, but I can't tell you who's really the starting offensive line. And the story is the same pretty much for wide receiver until Lazard gets in with Devontae gone and MVS gone. There's a lot of question marks leaving this minicamp.
Adam Stenavich last year probably did as good a job as any assistant coach in the league, given those injuries that you just mentioned. And for me, the stat of the year was during the San Francisco game in week 2 or week 3, they had a stat where other than Turner, there was no Green Bay offensive lineman who had started more than 2 games in the NFL. And I remember hearing that, and I thought, no. And there was, you just go down the list, and that was right. And they won that game. They won the game, a tough game against the 49ers, and they played well the entire year. Not great, and it kind of came back to haunt them finally against San Francisco in the playoff game where A-Rod was under fire, under rush, constant rush. I think that the offensive line played poorly in the playoff game, but on the whole, for who they lost and the amount of time they lost their best players, it was an amazing job that Stenavich did in Butkus last year.
I guess that the reason that you haven't heard more screaming headlines of concern about, do the Packers really know what they're doing on offensive line? Because you've got Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins, and you decide to move on a right tackle from Dennis Kelly, a veteran there, is the fact that these guys have done such a great job, particularly last season, in reinventing the offensive line. That you can throw in Josh Nijman at left tackle for 8 games and hold down the fort and do a pretty good job. And that even though you lost Lucas Patrick to the Bears and some other versatile veterans, the the crowd that they've got. I mean, today, John, at practice, I saw Runyon stand there next to Josh Myers, Jake Hansen, Royce Newman, and it kind of reminds me of some of the core offensive lines that Ted Thompson put together that eventually got them to a Super Bowl. They just don't have those roles determined right now. Now, the thing about Stenovich is, and he was one of those guys too, like a sixth or seventh lineman in his brief career as a player up here, is that he's been this great hands all over the place, doing such a great job with the versatility offensive line, and Luke Butkus is his assistant. Was he really paying attention that much to the passing game? Because Nathaniel Hackett, your offensive coordinator that took the head coaching job with the Broncos, Hackett he's an NFL a lifeline coach. He's like that series they've got on the NFL Network. He's like Belichick in a way that he's been around football since he was 8 years old. His dad, Paul Hackett, was with the 49ers and with Pitt and then with the Chiefs. Nathaniel Hackett had an uncle, Mike McCarthy, who was a tight end coach. He's been around football his whole life. Now you lose that guy, that perspective that can be up in the booth during the game telling LaFleur, here's what the opposing secondary is doing. Here's the kind of pass plays we ought to be calling. And the prep that he put in for those game plans, is Stenovich ready for that? He must be a quick study. That's why, LaFleur was not going to let him get away. But I think this will be interesting to see how much Stenovich can help out LaFleur in game time situations to diagnose what defenses are doing, particularly in the passing game.
There's a new special teams coach, and it seemed like the Packers over the last few years tried to address special teams on the cheap, and it came back to haunt them big time last year. And just look back, the comparison or the comparison from the parallel universe would be the 1996 Packers, where special teams, whenever the great defense and offense couldn't perform, the special teams gave them that little bonus that they gave them good field position. Every time they punted, Hendrick punted, and then the punt back, there was 10 yards on every change of possession at least that the Packers gained between Desmond Howard and Craig Hendrick. Last year it was really a nightmare. Talk about the new special teams coach and what you see as the new atmosphere around special teams.
Rich Bisaccia was out there today at practice, and right in the middle of practice, to give some of the offensive and defensive players a bit of a break. But I've been through Slocum and Zook and all these guys. This didn't look like anything like those guys had done the last 20 years up here. And that is, those guys were just trying to get, platoon people. Like, hey, you're on punt coverage now, and make sure people are lined up, and there's a little bit of timing, and maybe they're talking about return right, return left. Rich Bisaccia's out there talking to offensive linemen on the punt coverage team or the punt protection team, and he's talking about their eyes. Where like he was like a receivers and quarterback coach. He's like, I need you to look. You need to look here. Then you need to look at the linebackers. Then you need to look at what the return setup is going to be downfield. I mean, it's that kind of checkpoint in detail he's working on. The other thing is that he's using a lot of leverage to say we're going to put starters on the field to establish field position. Now, during that loss to the 49ers, A.J. Dillon, you didn't have him in the fourth quarter in the snow. Why? Because he got hurt on that kick return. Right. He got a fractured rib. So, that's the dangers when you put some of these starters back there on special teams. But so far, we can see Bisaccia has a detail in his technique that he's teaching, and also, he's got no time for goofing around. I mean, he walked into it. He had this one OTA session where he's throwing tennis balls at the return guys for quickness, reaction, everything. So when he came into his first press conference with the media in the auditorium, one of the senior writers said, "Oh, hey, coach, I forgot to bring my tennis balls to your press conference." And Basaccia said, "Yeah, is there a question there?" So he doesn't play around.
That sounds like a much needed change of pace up there. That's wonderful, Mike. So, getting back to David Bakhtiari, boy, that injury was a long time ago, and I understand he's still not participating.
Yeah, Dave, was New Year's Eve, 2021. Left leg, just helmets and sweats, getting ready for a game, and all of a sudden, weird, just the left ACL goes out on him. Then he revealed in an interview after this past season, the 21 season, that yeah, my knee was. They had to drain it every week, and as hard as I trained to get in great physical condition, maybe he overdid it. But at some point in October, they felt that they were finding bone chips and those kinds of things. They had to go in and scope the knee, which was another setback for him. And he talked about it in January. He hasn't talked since then. But, like yesterday at practice, I'm looking, and there's David Bakhtiari. There's Elton Jenkins on an exercise machine. There's Kylan Hill, your return man, who, the third running back who had an ACL suffered in the kick return against the Cardinals. There's Rambo, the backup linebacker they use on special teams. There's Robert Tunyon. All these guys dealing with some of these ACLs, and they're not going to be there in August or September. And as for Bakhtiari, finally, LaFleur said the other day, instead of, yeah, he's working hard, 20 weeks of that, LaFleur said, look, here's what our plan is. We're not going to put David on the field until the start of training camp, and then we'll see where we're at. So right now, and even according to something Brian Goodikins said around the draft period, it's a 50-50 deal on David Bakhtiari.
Yeah, Elton Jenkins' injury was a killer. I think Jenkins is probably the best offensive lineman the Packers have had since Forrest Gregg. The reason why I say that is he can be all pro at any of the five offensive line positions. He's just an amazing talent. And when when he blew his knee, I think it was up in Minnesota, that was a crushing injury. But I got to give, again, props to the Packers. They were able to plug and play with late round picks.
Right, and that also means you got to ask a little bit more out of your running backs for pass protection. That means that Mercedes Lewis has got to be a little bit more used more frequently for helping out with blocks to get things going off on the edge. But no, Elton is such an interesting guy too because he's kind of soft spoken, hasn't got much to say, but he's kind of like reminds you of a blacksmith, a guy who works in the shop. When you start talking shop with him, he knows the technique of all of those positions, what the defense is doing. I mean, maybe he'll be an offensive line coach someday, but he's so keen at diagnosing what's going on with his opponent, at sizing that up, the way he uses his technique, and on top of that, he's strong as can be. So he was a tremendous pick, and Lord knows how much better they could have been if they'd had him at one of those positions against that tough 49ers defense in the playoffs.
Mike, how has Jordan Love looked so far?
I'll tell you this. He really was the first. It's hard to realize that we actually haven't been working with these guys one-on-one, face-to-face, 5 feet away until this past couple of weeks. But he walked into a press conference with 30 people in the middle of the locker room like it was his job. And there's a new height of confidence, and the way his tempo in 11-on-11s in these practices we've had with the mini camps with the veterans out there, but there's just no comparison to the way Aaron Rodgers throws the football. There's this drill that they do. They've done it the last couple of years, and it's kind of a touch pass. And the quarterbacks are in the middle of the field, and the receivers and the backs, by the way, they're running A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. Even Mark Murphy said in his letter to fans at the start of the month, yeah, we're going to include the running backs more in the passing game. I guess he's revealing the strategies for the year. But they're just asked, the quarterbacks are asked to do a touch pass, put it way up there, put a big arc on it, drop that ball, like a teardrop into the arms, timing and all that. And Love will be out there, and Ben Kurt and the other kid that they've got out there, and then Aaron Rodgers does it. And you just watch the rotation of the ball, yeah, and marvel how he does it. But there's just no comparison. So, Love gets the ball there. He's hitting targets over the middle quicker. Each day he does a little bit better job of getting the ball quicker out of his hands. But the real thing is you want to see is that can the guy manage the game and run that Shanahan offense with the triple fakes, and the play actions and the run options and those kinds of things to run the Shanahan offense the way LaFleur was hired to do, and the way even Matt Ryan did it when they went to the Super Bowl, as opposed to the half and half McCarthy, Rodgers, LaFleur offense.
We've been talking to Mike Clemens from the Bill Michaels Radio Network. Mike, thanks for going above and beyond. And if some of our viewers want to learn more about what you do, and where can we get some of your podcasts and some of your interviews on Bill Michaels' show?
I can be reached on the Twitter account at Mike Clemens NFL, Mike Clemens NFL on Twitter, and then I'll forward them to the next time I'm going to be doing on the air. Bill's show is based out of Madison. It's on WOKY AM 920 in Milwaukee and 12 other stations around the state. And out of The Zone, which is a sports talk station based in Madison, that's his flagship. And he's adding stations every day. So that's the way you can get the word out. And Bill's streaming live on YouTube as well, multi-platform, as you well know.
Sure. Well, thanks for going above and beyond, and we'll definitely have you back.
Thanks, John Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, that's our show for today. Thanks to Mike Clemens from the Bill Michaels Radio Network, who joined us live from Green Bay. And thank you to my guest host today, Dave Heineck from Business Fitness, who's our sponsor and the financing and ideas behind this show. So I appreciate that. Tell us one more thing about Business Fitness, if you can.
We have a lot of fun. We have only highly experienced people with 7 or 8 years or more of NetSuite experience, and we get things done a whole lot faster, and people are more productive more quickly.
If someone's interested, how can they best contact you?
Just go to our website at www.business-fitness.com.
Well, thank you for your sponsorship, and thank you for joining us today. Until next week, go Packers.